every decade leaves its mark, but the 1980s just didn't leave a mark. It left a mixtape, a movie marathon, and a wardrobe full of neon. From synth pop and shoulder pads to home computers and MTV, the 80s redefined what it meant to be modern. And here we are in 2025, still dancing to 80s music, wearing 80s fashion, and quoting 80s movies. So today, let's see how the best decade ever is still rocking in the future. Hey everyone, and welcome back to I Survived the 80s. If you remember blowing into Nintendo cartridges to make them work, recording songs off the radio onto cassettes on a Sunday evening, or taping Top of the Pops over your dad's favourite football match, then you are in the right place. The 80s weren't just a decade, they were an era of firsts. The first music videos, the first home computers, the first global pop stars who ruled the world. So let's fire up the time machine and find out how much of the 80s still shapes our lives in 2025. The 80s gave us a sound that never really went away. From the electric synths of Duran Duran to the power ballads of Bon Jovi, the 80s taught the world how to make a hit. And the influence? It's everywhere. Artists like The Weeknd and Dua Lipa used the same synthwave vibe that defined the decade. Vinyls are back, cassettes are trending again, and Stranger Things turned a 1985 Kate Bush track into a #1 hit nearly 40 years later. The 80s didn't just make music, it made memories that we can and still dance to.
I don't want a letter. We're right here. I'm right here.
Neon, Deb and big hair, three things that the 80s gave us that truly never died. In 2025, fashion designers are still dipping into that decade for inspiration. Oversized blazers, chunky trainers, and high-waisted jeans have all returned to the runway. Unfortunately, even the mullet is back. Yes, the mullet. Let's not forget the 80s accessories, scrunchies, aviator shades, and bum bags. They're all here again. It's funny, what we once wore unironically is now vintage gold. How old does that make us feel? Is that making us feel old or exceptionally lucky? So when it comes to technology, this is where it starts to get fascinating. The 80s didn't just give us fun gadgets. It laid the foundation for the digital world we live in today. Remember when home computers first hit the shelves? The Commodore 64, the ZX Spectrum, the Apple II. They looked like toys, but they created a generation of coders, gamers, and tech innovators, myself included. I grew up with an Amstrad CPC 464 with a colour monitor. I used to buy the magazines every month and enter the code into the computer to try to get it to play some simplistic game like Star Wars. And the results were pretty shoddy, but I did it. Yes, I had to wait for the following month's magazine for all the typo corrections, but it worked. And I created it and I was proud of it. Now people just take games and just don't have any concept of how much time and effort goes into designing them. Those early experiments in pixel graphics, floppy disks, and basic coding gave birth to the apps, games, and operating systems that we use every single day. And I've made a career out of it, so I'm proud to say that I am a 1980s Gen X geek. The first mobile phone call in the UK was 1985. Sure, the phone weighed about as much as a small dog, but it worked. And let's not forget the gaming revolution. Nintendo, Sega, Atari. They turned gaming into an industry that's now bigger than Hollywood itself. Even the idea of being online began in the 80s. We dialed up through modems that screamed at us for about 30 seconds, but it was the first taste of a digital connection. Without the 80s, there'd be no internet culture, no smartphones, no memes, basically no 2025 as we know it. The impact that the 80s had on 2025 really cannot be underestimated. So if you thought 80s pop culture would fade, think again. It's been remixed for a new generation. Hollywood can't stop rebooting our childhood. Ghostbusters, Top Gun, The Karate Kid, Blade Runner, Mad Max. They've all come back and audiences love them. Maybe not all of them, but the following is still there because those stories had something timeless. adventure, optimism, and heart, and usually a thumping soundtrack. If the next 5 seconds of audio does not give you goosebumps, were you actually born in the 80s? Even our streaming era is obsessed with the 80s. Stranger Things built its entire identity around 80s nostalgia. From the soundtrack to the clothes to the glow of those flickering arcade lights. Cobra Kai. It turned a classic 80s movie rivalry into one of the best shows on Netflix. Retro gaming bars are popping up everywhere. I built myself an arcade cabinet this year for my garden pub. It's amazing. I can play all my retro arcade games with proper graphics and proper joysticks, and it's something you don't get from a Nintendo Switch or a PlayStation 5. These pop-up arcades are now appearing with thumping 80s music where friends can go and battle Pac-Man and Street Fighter in cabinet-style arcades. The truth is, the 80s never really ended. They just upgraded to 4K. So why do we keep going back? Maybe because the 80s remind of a time when life was so much simpler. Before smartphones and social media and algorithms, we had face-to-face friendships, handwritten notes across the classroom, and Saturday morning cartoons. The 80s were full of imagination, bright, bold, and maybe a little bit crazy. And 2025, when everything feels digital and disposable and throwaway, that sense of real connection and optimism still feels refreshing. The 80s aren't just history, they're part of who we are. From our playlists to our wardrobes to our Wi-Fi, there's a little bit of the 1985 still running through our lives. So which part of the 80s do you think aged the best? Drop it in the comments below because I'd love to hear your memories. And don't forget to like and subscribe and hit that ring bell for more trips down memory lane. As a Gen Xer, the 80s was the best time to be a kid. It really was. I do not envy the current generation living in society where everything is online, where everything is algorithm driven, where the music is just rehashed music from the 80s. However, if you are a good Gen X parent, you will bring your children up to recognize that and appreciate it for what it is. My daughter has a record player. She has a massive vinyl collection now of Prince, The Cure soundtracks. She loves it. She loves the 80s retro. So if, like me, you brought your child up correct, then well done to you. So my name's Craig, and yes, I survived the 80s, and I will see you on the next video.